Welcome to Business on the Wire. From being in the eye of the bad loan storm, SBI, or State Bank of India, has spent the last 2 years putting many of its legacy issues in the corporate NPA cycle behind it. But what challenges does the banking industry continue to face in the quarters to come given COVID? And more importantly, what does the potential entry of banks backed by corporates point to? Joining me to talk about all of that is SBI's former chairman, Rajneesh Kumar. Thank you for joining in and speaking with me. It looks like from the recent quarterly numbers from SBI that some kind of earnings normalization has begun. What's your sense of where things are at, both in terms of, whether retail auto loans are picking up, market shares picking up, and how close or far, things may be from the pre-COVID levels?
As far as bank is concerned, the market would have been surprised, but I was not surprised. Obviously, one, I had the information, and the second is that over a period of time, there has been an effort to build up the earnings, and particularly the pre-provision operating profits through various measures which bank has taken. And the issue for the bank, as far as earnings is concerned, there are only two. One is the provisions for the terminal benefits, what we pension particularly. And then the other is, of course, how does the bank manage its credit costs? And credit costs have started coming down, and that is what is reflected in the earnings. Business-wise, keeping in mind the COVID scenario, the projections for business growth for the current year, there was some moderation done, and for liabilities, the growth has been projected at 12%, and for the loans and advances, 8%, and I think bank is on the path to achieve those numbers.
Does that target in terms of liabilities take into account though the situation in terms of the restructuring of loans, Mr. Kumar? Because while numbers have been on an uptrend, and much of that is credit to you, and when you took over stewardship of SBI, Moody's has pointed out that it looks like there is a large amount under that repayment moratorium, and it may be very early, considering the situation with the economy, to fully understand how much of these restructured loans might actually slip into becoming bad loans.
The restructuring pipeline is not very big. That is the thing to be noted. And the bank's estimate and the guidance which the new chairman gave about that the restructured book and NPA, the guidance on the conservative side is 60,000 crore. And there's the outer limit in my view, and that is what he had also said, and the number may turn out to be much better than that. So there's no great rush either from the corporates or from the retail segment borrowers to opt for restructuring. And that is true for State Bank, and that is true for the system, and there are several reasons for that. That you're not seeing a great rush. One is that a lot of cleanup in the last 3-4 years has happened on the existing framework which was available. A lot of deleveraging has happened. A lot of cases have been either resolved, including liquidation, and many of them are in the various stages of resolution. So in such a scenario, the fresh cases are not too many. And that is where, and this window is available up to 31st December only. And we are in November. So you can reasonably, it would be a reasonable estimate to assume that the restructuring pipeline or the number of cases restructured would not be large. Both in terms of number and
Sure. I was a bit intrigued by your comment in June, sir, where you said it's safe to declare SBI asymptomatic of bad loans in a context of where the RBI is pointing to bad loans jumping to as high as 12.5%. The GDP figures look like, the worst in the region at this point. Clearly, our problems are not done in 2020. Uh, would you feel as sanguine about 2021 as you're feeling about things so far?
So one is that RBI, the numbers they gave, generally these are the scenarios, and RBI does some sort of a stress test or a scenario testing, and the rating agencies also, I think, they went overboard. In June, what I said, both the state of affairs at that particular point of time and as well as the expected impact on the bank. Luckily for me, for the bank and for the country, things are turning out to be the way I had anticipated and predicted on the basis of the performance entirely the loan book of State Bank of India, the way the book was behaving. And that is where I think everybody went overboard in predicting the growth. I'm not saying that problems will not be there. If there is a prolonged recession, you can have problems. So one, if we are looking at that in one quarter, there will be elevated NPAs. So that will not be there. If the economy continues to behave the way it is behaving, then barring a few sectors, many other sectors you may not have any problem. So the problem may be confined to a few select sectors. And corporates, as I said, that for the banks, the maximum problem comes with the high level of NPAs in the corporate book. And why COVID-19 is turning out to be different than financial year 18 is that at that point of time there was accumulated NPAs of previous years, but because there were forbearances and restructuring framework are available, where banks were allowed to not treat them as NPAs, and when that dispensation was done away with, we saw the surge in NPAs in the FY18. This time, it's not going to be like one quarter or 2 quarters. So what is crucial is that the rebounds in the economy that continues. And if that continues, then we will have NPAs, and they may be a bit higher than what it was in the past. Nothing of the magnitude and the quantum which was being talked about.
When you talk about provisioning, Mr. Kumar, especially for public sector banks like SBI, at this point, how much exposure do the public sector banks generally have to NBFCs like DHFL? I mean, since you referred to 2018, and has that already been provided for?
The one name you mentioned, at least State Bank, I know that 100% provision has been made, and 100% provision was made by June quarter. And the bank's provision coverage ratio in general, all banks, in last 3 years, banks have built up a very good provision coverage ratio. The State Bank of India, its provision coverage ratio where the technically written off accounts, if those are excluded, is at 71% as per the last declared results. And for the corporate book, it is higher at around 83 or 84%. If you take into account written off accounts like the one you mentioned, then the bank's provision coverage ratio is 80%. So bank never had such a high provision coverage ratio. The State Banks, as the reported figure of 36,000 crore net NPA. So it is like legacy accounts are almost fully provided for, because that is the amount you will be able to recover also. So that way, State Bank at least, they don't have any legacy now to be taken care of. Whatever fresh happens, COVID-19 or no COVID-19, those credit costs, I think bank will be able to manage quite well.
The problem also for the financial system generally, Mr. Kumar, has been that regulation has run on two parallel tracks. One on what the financial regulator says, and then one on what happens in court. You alluded to some problem sectors still remaining. How do you think banks are going to account for NPAs of the thermal and gas-based power projects? I think that stands at about 3 lakh crore worth. Because the Supreme Court now says there's going to be a special dispensation for their loans. Are those NPAs already recognized, sir, or will that be something banks will have to negotiate and
No,
circumvent?
everything is recognized and adequately provided. So initially, there was a list of 32 stressed accounts in power sector. So all have been dealt with. So either they would have been resolved, or the management change would have happened, or a few of them are still under NCLT. So what happens that aging provision also kicks in, and the all the provisions are as per the regulatory minimum provision, and many banks, including of course State Bank of India, with 100% surety, that the provision on the stressed power sector assets is aligned to the recovery. Bank may be holding a little bit more excess provision than what is required, but it is fully aligned. And because of the liquidity support which was given by the government through PFC and REC, I think the amount was 90,000 crore, and later on it was increased. So that has also helped quite a bit, because this money is straight going to the IPPs, power producers. And although borrowing is by the discoms, but the disbursement is to the power producer. So that has also helped the timely payment by these power producers. So that way, in terms of recognition of NPA, today there is no issue. And in terms of provisioning also, for the legacy accounts, there is no issue. So only it is that whatever fresh NPA comes, and then you have to adequately provide for those. And having learned their lessons, I think banks would be more proactive and will be providing more aggressively, more than what is required by regulation. And that would be the best and the right approach.
One certainly hopes so, Mr. Kumar. But speaking of SBI, one must also speak of Yes Bank. Two observations have come through, in terms of the numbers that we are seeing with Yes Bank. One, the fact that the quantum of unrecognized bad loans is still incredibly high, and it's unfolding over the next few quarters. And the other, of course, that capital does remain in place. In the near term and the more medium term, any key concerns you would highlight for Yes Bank?
NPA management, in any case, like any other bank, they are now in similar position, in the sense that legacy account, Yes Bank, it was taken care of at the time when SBI decided to invest, and they declared their quarterly result. Because for the new investors like SBI or the other investors, it was very critical that their losses or potential losses are fully recognized. And when the results were declared on, I think, 13th of March, so that balance sheet, I can say, in our view, as investor, presented a true and fair state of affairs. After that, yes, COVID-19 has complicated the matter, and the NPAs, I won't say unrecognized, there is no concept of unrecognized NPA. So either you recognize an account as NPA, or you classify it as whatever is the regulatory classification norms, SMA 0, 1, 2. And for Yes Bank also, because we invested money only in March, and the subsequent tranche when the came. So the books of Yes Bank, in my view and assessment, and I'm reasonably sure about it, that there's nothing needed. But yes, if because of COVID-19, the entire banking industry gets impacted, so Yes Bank can also be not an exception. But they are adequately capitalized. They have started building up their earnings. Their liability franchise it has come back. So for a bank, deposits are the raw material. So what is critical for a bank like Yes Bank is that they are able to diversify their source of deposits and have more percentage retail deposits. Still, the corporate is high. So that is one. And recovery and management of the bad loans. These two, but otherwise, Yes Bank has a very good technology platform, no doubt about it. Their quality of service, uh, I think that is good. That is the universal feedback that they are able to provide good quality service and good quality of HR resources. So, and with now very strong corporate governance structure in place, both at the board level as well as at the management team level. Okay, I am reasonably hopeful that the investment which State Bank and other investors have made, it will give a decent return.
When you took over the reins at State Bank of India, Mr. Kumar, I mean, it is an understatement to say you didn't have your hands full. It really was an uphill task for you in terms of what you took on. Would you say Yes Bank would be perhaps the most challenging point in that stint for you? Did you ever consider whether this made sense from State Bank of India's point of view, or were you quite convinced about this?
Yes Bank, of course, that was, I would say, unanticipated like COVID. So nobody anticipated COVID, and the State Bank of India, when I took over, Yes Bank was not on the horizon at all. It happened only in March this year. And so two major problems, Yes Bank and COVID, in the last 6 months of my tenure at SBI. And otherwise, yes, as you have mentioned, that it was a very challenging, exciting, full of action, and no dull moments as far as my stay is concerned.
This entire debate about taking over banks has now reached a kind of break point, Mr. Kumar. As you may have seen, the press has been awash with debate in the last 24 hours on whether or not corporate houses should be allowed to get banking licenses, whether they should be allowed to acquire these smaller banks. Some of the RBI governors, former RBI governors and deputy governors have raised serious concerns around this issue. What's your stand on this, and do you think this is indeed the best solution for the smaller PSBs or even the older private sector banks, such as Lakshmi Vilas Bank, which are certainly struggling? But do you think the solution lies in handing this over to corporates?
I think the concerns which have been raised are very valid, and those concerns have been raised even in the report of the internal working group. And the concern about concentration of power, misuse, connected lending, they all are very, very valid concern. And we have also have to realize writing the law and regulations is one thing, implementing them, execution is another. So you may have the best law, best rules, but you may falter at the execution stage. The questions are whether RBI, they have the capability to supervise. How do you prevent the connected lending? This is the biggest issue. On the other side, just a problem. So if a corporate is allowed to, suppose, invest in a small finance bank or a retail bank, whether those objections would still be valid. So whether there can be a situation, this is all a discussion point I am saying, right? Whether there can be a situation that corporates investing in non-corporate banking banks, the banks which don't do corporate banking, there is a need for enhanced flow of credit from the formal banking system to, say, MSMEs. There is a very, very common grouse and complaint against the formal banking system that there is no adequate flow of credit from the banks to MSME sector, and they still largely depend upon the informal sources of finance and which is expensive. Can there be banks, niche banks in MSME financing? Can there be niche banks in agri financing? And if these banks are owned or in ownership with the corporate, will there be still a big issue? So can we have a scenario where corporates invest but don't do corporate banking?
Let me pose some questions to you on that front then, Mr. Kumar. A, do you see high interest in corporates if indeed it is presented in that form saying, hey, you can't lend to the corporates, but you can get into other spaces that you said? B, do you not feel there should be some expertise in the financing space in order to allow corporates to get into banking? And C, what do you make of the timing? Because there is certainly a situation post-COVID where the smaller banks are capital stressed and they do need that capital. Does this not seem like a process of rushing something through the door where several concerns, such as the ones you included, have been pointed out?
Yeah. No, one is that the underlying presumption that corporates are going to rush into banking. So, one, no corporate will rush into banking. What we have to realize also that banking is a very difficult business. And world over, it is not the best business to be in because one, high cost of regulation and compliance. There is a huge cost in many banks now. The teams to handle the compliance and regulations are bigger than the teams to handle business. So it is a huge regulatory cost in being a bank. And make a decent return on equity. So if a corporate is there, and I am now looking at it from a corporate perspective, and if there are business opportunities and banking is one of them, then return on equity perspective, this may not be the best option. And about the smaller banks, and that is the point I made, that if there are banks which can be niche banks, and still, if a corporate believes that they can make money, they can get a decent return on equity, then I think there may be a case. So what I'm saying is that today I don't envisage a situation where a corporate is owning a universal bank. Universal bank in the sense they're doing all type of businesses. So this is a draft paper, and in 2 months there will be a lot of discussion and ideas like what I am mentioning now. So a lot of ideas that come, and maybe we will find a way, and regulators will find a way where the concerns relating to connected lending, corporate governance, they will need to be addressed. And before the first license is given to any corporate, it will be very, very important that the supervisory system at Reserve Bank of India is completely overhauled. If I look at RBI's capability to supervise, their hands are more than full. They have to supervise the banks, NBFCs, now cooperative banks, and every day we are seeing some trouble here or there. And then the added responsibility of supervising a bank with a corporate owning a bank and in corporate lending business, then of course it requires serious consideration. You can afford that. And imagine a situation that in last 3 years, the trouble which we have seen with Yes Bank and say LVB or PMC and a few NBFCs like Divan, this thing, and a few others. Imagine these people, many of these people holding a bank license. They could have brought havoc on the financial system. So whatever we do, this is what the other experts, central bankers have expressed the view. There is a merit in that. It will require a very careful evaluation. But per se, just to exclude every possibility, I think that is also not required. We are a large country. As I said, there is a need for flow of credit, particularly to agriculture and MSCs in a new way, not the traditional way. And then if somebody is willing to put the money, okay, corporate banking, it is very difficult to make money. I can tell you from my experience that corporate banking, for some time you make money, and in 1 year you lose all money.
Even if all these rules are put in place, Mr. Kumar, let me come to the basic sort of concern here. Is there any way, even in the guidelines, to circumvent a situation where a corporate is in high debt itself, highly leveraged, and then works its way into becoming a bank? Does this seem morally, ethically correct at all? And I'm asking you this from the Indian context, where the Indian financial system still remains quite fragile. As you said, we are still recovering from an ILNFS and a DHEL, DHFL, etc.
No, there is an issue because, as I said, that you can have all the rules and regulations, but enforcing them is extremely, extremely difficult. And ownership, independence of the boards, independence of the management teams. So can owner keep away? And then the question would be that if I'm putting my money and if I don't have any say in running the bank, so will I invest? So that's what I'm saying, that these are some very complicated questions. So one is, the safest way is don't allow. Let me put it this way. Then it is the safest. But as I said, that the country is, if I can use the word credit starved, certain segments, whether the rules can be focused in such a manner that the credit starved sectors are served. And then the enhanced risk, a corporate houses running NBFCs which have become very large. So definitely bank, in terms of contagion effect, it is a definitely much more risky entity. But at the same time, as I was mentioning, the regulatory oversight and the compliance requirement and the compliance policy are on banks. So NBFC sector has been, if I can say, it has a regulatory arbitrage, very lightly regulated, lightly supervised, and then we have problems like we have seen in the past. So problems have happened in the NBFC sector also. But the way they have been dealt with compared to Yes Bank, we have both the examples. We have the examples of failed NBFCs and we have the examples of failed banks. But in case of NBFC, finding the solution or allowing it to go to administration, it has been easier.
Mm.
Allowing a bank to fail, even if it is a 10,000 crore deposit bank,
Yeah.
like PMC Bank, where the deposit is just 10,000 crore. Why it is taking so much time and attention from Reserve Bank of India? Because even a small bank, its contagion effect is huge. So that is the differentiation which is between an NBFC and bank. And the size, and I read Deputy Governor's statement about the size of the NBFCs. So what is said there, that above a certain size, the regulators themselves are not comfortable that NBFCs have assets beyond a certain point. And from where this concern is coming, because the RBI's inability to supervise those entities the way they supervise banks. So I think much more debate will be needed, much more debate will happen. And yes, the safest way is don't allow. The middle path is allow, but without corporate banking. But if you do that, then whether anybody is interested or not.
You lived through a period of system shock almost, Mr. Kumar, for the banking space, largely, and for public sector banks especially, I think, in terms of what you had to wade through on bad loans and then what came through on COVID and Yes Bank, as you said. If you were to draw one key red flag for public sector banks, especially going ahead, what would you point to? What must they remain mindful of for the next several quarters in order to prevent a similar situation to what we had in 2018?
Only thing is about the major thing is around how do you manage your risk and how do you price your risk. Apart from many other issues which public sector banks today are grappling with, the biggest issue is around the risk management, particularly the credit risk management and capability to price the risks adequately. So this is, I think, something which needs a lot of focus. And at the same time, what you keep on hearing is that complete risk aversion. So how do you manage the risk? That is the biggest challenge. And the public sector banks, there are a lot of rigidities on HR side in terms of ability to hire the talent, pay them. So I think all the public sector banks, I have always said that we have to swim with both the hands tied to our back.
You raised a very important point, sir, and let me ask you specifically for your sense of what the future for the MSME space might be, because as you said, the fear of what went through in 2018 has almost frozen the hands of public sector banks, and those large blow-ups have prevented credit flow to some of these smaller entities who need it urgently.
So about the credit reversion, public sector banks, I think they are being unfairly targeted. You read the statements in last 6 to 8 months of many private sector banks. So when it comes to risk aversion, while talking only about public sector banks, just scrutinize the statements of many private sector bank heads and then form that opinion that whether the credit risk, so-called credit risk reversion, because from the banker side, I will say that we are being more prudent, and but the so-called credit risk aversion, it is not only the sole prerogative of the public sector banks. So a few private sector banks were always credit risk averse, and that tribe has increased in the private sector banks also. So overall, again, the dividing line is very thin, that whether banks are being more prudent or they are being risky. But specifically coming to MSME, one heartening thing is that there is a lot more available, and based on the capabilities to analyze this data, new models of lending and managing the loan portfolio are emerging. And that is a big positive, and which should not be underestimated. The power of information and the power of technology. When we talk about MSME, we may put the blame entirely on the banking system. But the fact of the matter is that there is no reliable data or information available as well as their financial statements are concerned. And banks need that. And that's where the informal system is able to lend because they don't need any paper. Formal banking system will need all the papers, and papers are not available, information is not available. But now that is changing with GST, with income tax related data, credit bureaus, now information utility is coming in. So the traditional way of lending is giving to a new way of lending. And that is where our hope lies. And that is what would ensure the flow of more credit from the formal banking system.
Just one final question in our conversation, then, sir. I mean, I don't think anyone can take away the fact that in your tenure at SBI, you were certainly swimming with both hands tied, and you did an exemplary job of it. The one sort of point of criticism that one has observed is that SBI has always fallen short on creating shareholder value. You talked about, private sector peers, where HDFC's market cap, has grown to what, 7.8 lakh crore, somewhere around that, whereas SPI is still stagnating at about 2.5 lakh crores, even though you have such a large, bank asset portfolio, your retail lending is so large. Why that gap?
This question you have to ask to the people who invest. So investing has also become more technical in the nature and the hard mentality.
Is it a fear, though, sir? Is it a fear amongst
So they,
investors that SBI gets lumped with stuff
no,
and
no, no,
they can't
no.
do anything
If you
about
look at the earnings of HDFC, one feature is visible to everybody that they earn a lot and earn consistently quarter after quarter. The performance is very good in terms of both the quality of the earnings and consistent growth. The State Bank of India, we have not been able to do. Second is there is a huge ownership discount. If government today announces that SBI they are going to bring down their holding to 49%, the State Bank share price will double. So that is another. Government ownership has its own advantages and disadvantages. Third, if you look at the state holders value creation, then State Bank has not fallen short. You see the kind of segments we serve. A man on the street, can he open an account in a private bank? Free of cost? Do private sector banks have the branch network which a State Bank has? There is a cost to that. 40% of the State Bank branches, they contribute 15% to the revenue. So there are certain costs added to in the public sector bank with a specific mandate of serving the underprivileged. So whenever the comparison has to be, it has to be an apple with apple and orange with orange. But if you look at it from 48 crore customers, 22,500 branches, 58,000 ATMs. So when investors give value to e-commerce company, what do they give value to? Gross merchandise sold, nobody talks about the profit. So investors have their own way of looking at things. And I have always believed this has been my, you can say, grievance, that the investors have not looked at the true value of State Bank of India. But I am very, very hopeful that eventually they will. But this is an entity which is unique, which is pride of this nation, and huge earning potential also. If the valuation is only around earnings, consistency in earnings, then I think you will see better days ahead in terms of values.
We all hope so, sir. I really appreciate your candor and forthrightness in this conversation with me. Thank you for taking time out, and I wish you the very best. I'm sure there's a long and illustrious career ahead of you after your long chapter with STI as well. Thank
I
you.
will become a journalist like you.
Please, sir, I've got too much competition already. Thank you very much for your time today, sir. Thank you.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.